Episcopal Church, the 16th Episcopal District. Voting is power, and collective voting is unity and strength. Our collective votes are needed to change the conditions of women and children in this country. We are the guardians of the faith, the keeper of the village peace, and the giver of life to humanity. We need the spirit of our mothers and our grandmothers to change and protect the lives of our children and those yet unborn. Please join with us and let's get the job done collectively. Let's work with AME Alert and get all voters to the polls to vote on November the 3rd. It's our time. It's our watch. It's our lives. Vote and get others to vote. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the latest edition of the Christian Recorder Dialogues. I am your host, Chuck Hobbs. I am looking forward to the next hour and a half where we will have a number of legislators hailing from red states in the Deep South, where we will have an opportunity to talk about many of the salient issues that all of us are considering as we move closer to the November 3rd election. With that, I would like to introduce Sister Jackie DuPont Walker, and she will further introduce our distinguished panelists this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Chuck Hobbs, and thank you to John Thomas for the vision for this dialogue. We welcome everyone who has come, especially our Senior Bishop, Adam Jefferson Richardson, who has greeted us, and we believe we will have other members of the Council of Bishops joining us and will be acknowledged in turn. Why have we come today for this particular topic? AMEs are called to serve, which includes ordained and lay ministry. Now, in the spirit of hundreds of post-construction elected officials who served both in Washington, D.C. and their local areas, we are proud, we are ecstatic, we are on top of the world that more than 30 members of state houses have self-identified as members of this faith movement that we know as the African Methodist Episcopal Church. AME Alert is joining today with its partners because 5 of those can give us some insight into what we're called to do in 2020, can give us the word for moving forward in these last 36 days before Election Day on November 3rd. But what is AME Alert? It is AME Church's mobilization, education, and registration initiative, founded in 1999 at the same time as the Moral Majority when it made its debut. We felt we had experienced the worst in our lifetime, so I don't know what we call now. But go to www.ame-valert.org for details. You will see videos, Facebook posts, Instagram messages, e-blasts, and a daily countdown is available to you for action every day. Who do we have today? We have Representative David Fielding, from the 12th Episcopal District in the state of Arkansas. He is a member of Union AME Church in Mount Holy, Arkansas. Welcome, Representative Fielding.
Thank you.
Have Senator Audrey Gibson from the 11th Episcopal District in the state of Florida. She is the Senate Minority Leader in the state of Florida, and she's a member of St. Paul in Jacksonville, Florida. Welcome, Senator Gibson. We have Representative Reverend Harold M. Love from Tennessee in the 13th Episcopal District, and he is a Democratic floor leader and pastor of Lee Chapel in Nashville. We are welcoming Representative Billy Mitchell from Georgia in the 6th Episcopal District, and he is a member of St. Philip in Atlanta. And rounding out our group, Senator Tammy Witherspoon from Mississippi in the 8th Episcopal District, and she is a member of Bethel in Macomb, Mississippi. Now, each of you who are with us is important. So in the chat section, we would like for you to list your home Episcopal district, and we think you know it, your local church, and then your questions. We would then be able to report on the fact that every Episcopal district was here today for this dialogue. Back to you, Mr. Hobbs.
Thank you so much, Sister DuPont Walker. And again, my name is Chuck Hobbs, and I bring you greetings from the 11th Episcopal District. I had an opportunity to chat in the broadcast studio with my senior bishop, Adam Jefferson Richardson, and I am at Bethel AME Church in Tallahassee, Florida. My pastor is Reverend Julius McAllister Jr. With that, I'd like to get started with this question to the entire panel, and whoever wants to jump in first, go right ahead. In what ways can your individual church, an AME church, make its commitment to civic engagement and advocacy better in your line of work as state legislators? Who wants to start with that question?
Let the ladies go first.
All right. Senator Gibson, you want to jump in first?
Can you repeat the question? I think
yes, ma'am. Sure. Basically, in what ways can your individual church help you with civic engagement and help you with your work in the Florida Senate?
Well, I believe our churches as a denomination are extremely civically engaged anyway. And so to add to that is participation in events like this, coming to the Tallahassee during committee weeks, organizing a few of our congregation members to come during committee weeks for testimony. Also create a document, a position statement on things like healthcare, which the minority health disparities is a huge issue, and continue to educate our congregation on these issues and show them how they can even engage without going to Tallahassee, but emails, letters, and making calls to legislators on particular issues.
Thank you, Senator Gibson. Anyone else want to weigh in on that first general question for the entire group?
You know, I think this is Representative Felden, and I think she hit it right on the head. You know, we have to get involved, and by getting involved, then you know we can help those out, our constituents out, our members out that having those problems, whether it's with some state agencies that they might be dealing with. But I guess, you know, once we get involved and make that connection, that we could, you know, discuss and listen to those issues that might be going on in the community that we are not hearing. So I think by getting involved, calling those persons together, setting up dialogue meetings like we've done, in a group of session, and to talk these things out, the issues that they might be having. And let the church need to take that storefront and discuss those issues.
Mm.
Yes, sir, Representative Fielding. And we'd like to apologize for the technical issues that we're having with regards to your picture, but
I got me crooked here.
It's all right. We're glad to have you here with us, brother. And so what I'd like to do is a comment.
If I could add to that.
Sure. Who's talking now?
This is Representative Harold Love from Tennessee.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Representative Love.
Many of our annual conferences have literary reports where we talk about the state of the country and the state of the church. I think one way the church could really be involved and committed to civic engagement is to take those action items that are reported out at the annual conference and follow up with those action items. It does us no good to report about the state of the country or the state of the church if we don't then engage our state legislators to make sure that those issues we're talking about are addressed. So I would love to see a situation where when we have our annual conference and we have these reports about the state of the church and the state of the country, that we also include what's the state of the state that you're in, and then follow up with your state legislator to bring about those changes.
Excellent idea.
Absolutely. Brother Hobbs, I tell you, this is what happens when you assemble such a great panel. They certainly have hit it on the mark. But if I may, let me just take the time to thank you for including me. And, when we talk about these social justice issues, what better church to be entered into this discussion than the African Methodist Episcopal Church? You know, I always like to say that, you know, when they were denied the opportunity to worship in dignity, they just didn't sit idle. Richard Allen and others started the AME Church while working to end such injustices. Perhaps the single most important court decision as it pertains to Black folk in this country is the landmark Brown versus Board of Education case, which essentially dismantled the legal doctrine of segregation. Well, the lead principal, Brown, was the Reverend Oliver Brown, pastor of the St. James AME Church in Topeka, Kansas. Oh, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is rightfully credited with leading the nonviolent movement, but it was a petite and obviously tired stewardess who initiated that movement, and her name was Rosa Parks, member of the St. Paul AME Church of Montgomery, Alabama. The first doctor anywhere to complete a successful open heart surgery was a Black man operating on a white man, no less. And his name was Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, member of the St. Stephen's AME Church of Chicago, Illinois. The Oprah Winfrey of her day, multi-millionaire hair care tycoon. Her name was Madam C.J. Walker. She was a member of the St. Paul AME Church of St. Louis, Missouri. The Moses of her time, the conductor of the Underground Railroad with a Bible in one hand and a gun in the other, said, "You'll either be freed by God's hand or die by mine." And her name was Harriet Tubman, member of the Thompson Memorial AME Church of Auburn, New York. The architect of the biggest rebellion to free slaves in the history of this nation was Denmark Vesey, a member of the Mother Emanuel AME Church of Charleston, South Carolina. We literally built this country with slave labor, including the White House in Washington, D.C. And the designer of that was a Black man by the name of Benjamin Banneker, member of the Mount Moriah AME Church of Annapolis, Maryland. Among the first Black members of the Georgia General Assembly, who was soon thereafter expelled simply because of the color of his skin. He later became the 12th bishop of the AME Church, and his name was Henry McNeil Turner. So for all those reasons, I'm so glad to be here and certainly replicating, trying to continue taking the baton for these issues of social justice.
Representative Mitchell, as an old history and civics teacher before I ever went to law school, I was really excited listening to you recite those very crucial moments in Black history. And I really hope that those who don't know that information about our church will take that and share it widely, because I think that lack of history sometimes is one of the impediments that I am seeing across the country in regards to why many of our constituents, fellow constituents, find themselves in the ruts that they find themselves in. But with that, let me kick off now. We talked about civil rights. Representative Mitchell just gave a great narrative going back from the time of slavery through the civil rights movement. And many people have concluded that the Black Lives Matter movement is but the latest iteration of the greater fight for civil rights that initially started off with a right for abolition. With that in mind, Black Lives Matter has been a crucial issue in this year's presidential campaign. On a state level, this is for the entire group, what efforts are being expended in your individual state legislatures to address social justice in general and police reform specifically? I would like to start with Senator Gibson first, from the state of Florida, like I am, and then whoever wants to jump in from there. Yeah, I'm a gentleman, Senator Gibson, so I always start with the ladies first. So go ahead and weigh in, and then we'll rotate from there.
And you be sure and tell Pastor McAllister I said hello.
I promise I shall.
Time, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so I want to circle back to though really quickly, but it's really a part of our entire discussion, and that is in this country, individuals have tried to make churches feel like they're breaking the law if they advocate. And that is far from the truth. And so our churches can certainly advocate for policy without any penalty or fear of their nonprofit status. Advocacy is definitely something that we can continue to do. And so in terms of the Black Lives Matter, I think that may or may not necessarily be connected to the presidential campaigns, but it's all definitely connected to what we've seen happening in law enforcement, which obviously spills over into the political realm, given that our governor, Chuck, decided that he wanted to send out a signal last week that people who there's a bill that he doesn't pass any bills, by the way, but that he's considering language for that really doesn't allow people to march at all in protest. And so it's bringing out the ugly side as well, because it's connected all to Trump, because they're trying to make this, I believe, a black-white issue, or people of color versus white issue, and it's not that. So specifically for our legislature, the Black Caucus has started putting bills in drafting to deal with the issue of police reform, limitation of use of force, no chokeholds, and demilitarization of how law enforcement deals with the people that it serves. And so once we're not in session, and so obviously when we come back after organizing in November, after the elections, these bills will be top of mind for us, particularly as a Black caucus. And that includes training, school policing, where many of our kids come in their first contact with law enforcement and go down the school to prison pipeline. We'll be dealing with all of those issues. Body cams as well.
Yes, ma'am. Representative Fielding. Yes, ma'am. Representative Fielding, what are your thoughts on this subject? What's going on in your state with regards to social justice in general and police reform specifically?
Yeah, let me go back. Let me circle back a little bit on something that Representative Love said earlier too, about those annual conference reports. And I think, if we could take those issues that comes back to that conference, and as we take them back to the General Assembly when we meet, and we can meet with the caucus, and we can start putting some of that stuff in legislation that we can be presented, the ideas that come up from that. So just want to touch base on that. Here in Arkansas, there's when everything broke loose, the governor set up a task force to deal with police reform, and on that task force, there are a variety of people that's on there with the law enforcement. There's some of the activists, the community activists that was in the marches on that. So that task force are meeting now and getting together to see how we can train our police, our law enforcement better, evaluate them, test better, psychological test better, to try to cut out those mental persons that's coming into the using law enforcement to get into to carry their game. So that task force that is working on, I think, is going to be very crucial on police reform and getting everything back where we won't be maybe so harassed or picked on when we are driving. The second thing that we are doing legislative wise is that I think Arkansas is the only state that does not have a hate crime bill. We are in our interim study now. We are working on a hate crime bill to be presented in January when we meet. And I think, it's going to have some challenges. We're already getting some challenges, not just by being an interim study. But I think once we get those across the aisle to see what we are trying to do, the governor already said he support, a hate crime bill. So we just got to put it all together. And hopefully by January, we can have all that put together and ready to go when we meet again.
Thank you, sir. I also would like to welcome to the call Senator Tammy Witherspoon of Mississippi. We will be calling on her short enough, but welcome this afternoon.
Thank
Also,
you.
yes, ma'am. Okay. And Representative Love, can you jump in with regards to what's going on up in Tennessee on this issue?
Like so many of the states, we were, of course, appalled by what happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. And we addressed with our governor these concerns around law enforcement policies. And here recently, the governor has formed a task force and has released new measures for training. But my concern about that is the fact that those regulations are not put into law as a codified version. We call it Tennessee Code Annotated. It's not law yet. It's just the regulation or the rules of that particular department. So we're working now to look at ways to enhance what the governor has put forth and to make sure that when we come back in January, we're able to take what has been written in the regulations with the increased number of hours for training, with the increased emphasis on how law enforcement should engage with the public, and with the outlawing of chokeholds. We also want to make sure, again, that we make that law so that if another administration comes in, they cannot go in and remove those regulations from that department. So we also want to make sure that we address these issues of how persons are allowed to protest. We unfortunately recently had legislation passed that says that if you are camping on state property, like the Legislative Plaza, it has now become a felony. And so we want to, address those issues also, because we want people to be able to protest and to raise their concerns, particularly on issues of social justice, and make sure they're not penalized and lose their right to vote over that.
Thank you. And yeah, I find that troubling. Senator Gibson noted that we're dealing with that down here in Florida, Representative Love, in regards to trying to criminalize the aspect of exercising one's First Amendment right. It's kind of wild that, many of us watched and read in history. Some of us were around to be able to witness what was going on in the 1950s and 60s when the SCLC and CORE and SNCC and everyone was being arrested for exercising those First Amendment rights. And it's kind of beguiling almost to realize that here we are in 2020 and we have Southern state legislatures and Southern state governors that are trying to do the same thing that was going on back during the old Bull Connor and Ross Barnett and Lester Maddox days. So with that,
the danger is that once one does it, I'm sorry, the danger is that once one state passes it, it then becomes, a model legislation for the next one. So I just want to add that piece in there also.
Yes, sir. And with that, Representative Mitchell, jump on in with your thoughts in Georgia. What's going on with social justice in your legislature, and what's going on specifically with regards to police reform?
Well, I must say, despite the many crimes of hate motivated by hate in Georgia, we just passed a hate crimes legislation this past session, just went into effect July 1st. And what precipitated that is during the session, the Ahmaud Arbery situation was revealed. It had happened some time ago, but it was finally revealed. For those of you who don't remember, Ahmaud Arbery was a Black young man who was simply jogging through a white community that was near where he lived. He was spotted by some vigilantes who pursued him, killed him, while using the worst of racial epithets. That was the spark that led to many protests here and elsewhere. And I must say, it was the advocacy of the 6th District Episcopal Bishop, Reginald Jackson, which led the way to that being law, because it was his advocacy in getting the churches involved, the AME churches involved in Georgia, which certainly was enabled us to turn the tide. So that ties in with your point earlier. What can the church do? Another leader, certainly who was well rooted in the AME church, W.E.B. Du Bois, said it best, that power sees nothing without a demand, and the church can help us create that demand for change, which those of us in this policymaking business understand very oftentimes that's the only way that we're going to make change. Here in Georgia, we're also talking about reimagining the police, if you will. I think those who came up with this notion of defunding the police, a better a way of saying it would be to reimagine the police. Here in Georgia, in virtually every police department, you call 911, you get the police department, whether it's a police issue or not. You know, as it's been said to me many a times, if you only have a hammer in your toolkit, you look at every problem as a nail. The reality is sometimes people need the fire department. Sometimes they need some social services. We had an incident where a young man had some medical issues and fell asleep at a Wendy's drive-up window. Had they been able to call some social services there, the outcome would have been different. We're also on the verge of outlawing no-knock warrants in this state.
Excellent. And Senator Witherspoon, again, welcome this afternoon. And the question that's before the panel at this point is, in your state of Mississippi, what efforts are being expended to address social justice in general and police reform specifically?
Okay, first of all, I want to say good afternoon. And I want to apologize to my esteemed colleagues about being late on this call. For some reason, I was getting mixed up on my time, but I am here and I am very glad to be a part of this conversation. Well, in the state of Mississippi, the legislature only meet 3 months out of a year, which is January to March. So unfortunately, as of now, we hadn't done any legislative so far as of this session, 2020, to address social issues, but the Mississippi Legislative Black Caucus, we are meeting. We are also having meetings with groups, the Mississippi ACLU, Civil Liberties Unions of Mississippi, the NAACP, Center for Justice for Change. We are holding meetings right now as we speak with these different groups to come up with legislation for our 2021 session to address a lot of those issues.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. And with that, I also want to go to the second group question. And the way this is going to work, after we finish this second group question, I'm going to break you off into groups of twos. It's 5 of you, so there will be one person that will get a third time at bat. And Senator Gibson, we're picking on you because you're the homegirl to get a third at bat down the line. But for the entire group, the coronavirus has forced the AME church, like all churches, but definitely our denomination, to adjust how its spiritual, social, and philanthropic aims are being delivered since February or March of this year. What is the importance of our denomination in ameliorating the social, political, and economic issues that our nation is facing as a result of the coronavirus pandemic? And when you're answering this question, if you want to talk about some of the things that are happening within your own state legislatures to help offset individuals who are either out of work or underinsured or just concerned that, you know, things are not, or especially the education piece as well, please weigh in and let us know what your thoughts. So again, Senator Gibson, you're first up. Go ahead and give me your thoughts about the coronavirus pandemic and how that is being handled down here in the state of Florida.
All right, thank you. And I will make sure I leave time for everyone this time. Obviously, well, let me just give you a little background first on the cases in the state are at just over 700,000 in the state of Florida, positive cases. And if you didn't hear the number today in the United States, it's over 7 million. And so in terms of funding, there's been no more budget given more to what is happening as it relates to COVID than what was included in the CARES Act. And that's most likely around the country that would be the case, because that was designed to be used for specific purposes, like unemployment, so that a state doesn't find itself in total debt. as we continue to navigate. And so one of the things in Florida that I know we will deal with in the next legislative session is the extremely low unemployment benefit that was deliberately set low by a Republican governor who's now a Republican United States senator in Florida. And we only have two of them, and it's not the one whose last name ends in R. And so the social component, as I mentioned earlier, really deals with healthcare disparities. So, and across this country, the high percentage of deaths in African Americans, Hispanics, and other people of color because of COVID, the blinders have been taken off on healthcare disparity issues that have existed over time. And so the church again, our church again, can be extremely engaged in how we prepare for session. We need to be raising our voices now about ensuring that the health disparity gaps in funding for minority health care is not considered to be spread in the whole health department's budget, but that our closing the gap section specific to minority health care needs to be increased. And so our church can raise their voices on that particular issue. If I'm getting to the question that you're asking me, ameliorating social, political, and economic issues obviously takes time, but in order to go towards it, we have to raise our voices collectively and give the data out to our congregations so they're fully aware and can be fully engaged when it's time to go and testify or use social media to bring these issues forward. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Anybody else want to weigh in on that in regards to what's going on in your particular state with regard to COVID-19, be it funding from a federal level, how it's trickling down to the states and being distributed to individuals? Anybody want to weigh in on that before we head into the individual questions that I have that I will carry off in twos?
I'll add this if I can. I was assigned to sit on the state's Financial Accountability Task Force, which was going to be distributing our $2.3 billion. And one thing I want to say is that Representative Mitchell pointed out earlier that we already have a built-in structure in the AME Church to help ameliorate these social, political, and economic issues we're facing in our community, because our churches are usually situated right in the heart of our community, and they can be used to help deliver food baskets to persons who are suffering from food insecurity. They can also be used to be nonprofits that help provide these rent payments. In Tennessee, we set aside $150 million for nonprofits to help distribute money to persons suffering from COVID-19 shutdown. And some of our churches have applied to and been awarded sums of money to be able to be rent payment facilities. And so we can build upon that as we go forward, because we can allow our churches to still be used again to help deliver food, to deliver rent payments, and also to be places where COVID-19 tests can take place. Just this past Saturday at Lee Chapel, we partnered with a dental company, and we were able to distribute 1,200 food baskets because, again, we were located in the heart of the community. It cost us nothing, but they used our church because we were always seen as one of those key factors in helping ameliorate already social and political issues.
Yes. You know, Brother Hobbs, if I may, I will tell you, in addition to those brilliant remarks by my cohorts, I will tell you one of the greatest things that we can do, particularly as an AME church, is to be the example. The reality is when this pandemic is finally over, when it finally subsides, I hope at the end of the day, we have not lost not one single church. Because if we do, all that means is the concentration was on the building and not the mission. You know, we love our edifices. As a matter of fact, I put my church's website in the chat so you can go. We have a beautiful edifice, 6,000 member church, one of the largest in all of the AME churches. But the reality is, where there's two or more gathered in his name, there can be the church also. And I can tell you all for a fact, Representative Reverend Love used to be the chaplain of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. And many a day we would have church just by his opening prayer. So during these times, I would just want to be let it known that we as a church should still be about the mission, making sure that people are being fed, and those who have needs are being addressed, and those that need to be taught are being taught, and hopefully the tithes are still being paid so that the mission can go on.
Yes, sir. Okay, you all, I'd like to shift toward some of the individual questions. And Representative Fielding, you're actually first up. Earlier this year, State Representative Vivian Flowers, a Democrat out of Pine Bluff, and Reverend Ryan Davis were confronted and a gunshot was fired. And my question for you is this: with a state official and a clergy member being confronted in such a manner by fellow citizens, what can our denomination do to peacefully push back against increasing incidents of overt hostile racism?
You know, we're going to have to come together and start talking about racism. We're talking about it among ourselves. I think until we start making it a more ecumenical, make it more talking to more just people that look like me about racism, then we can start the dialogue. You know, we come to be stagnated about approaching and talking about racism. So when that subject come up, it's like it's just a touchy subject that we don't want to tackle. So, you know, until we bring all those pieces together, you know, and our church and Bishop Mitchell always talk about our class system. You know, we have the wonderful system in our church that we can disseminate that information to. Whether that discussion can be done on a presiding district, whether it on a conference level or a district level. You know, that discussion of racism, we need to start talking about it, have a more individual involved in it, so that when we talk to a white person about racism, that their interpretation is different than what I think about it. So we got to get those talk about racism and get those issues on the table, so we can maybe curb that hatred or curb that overt down in our country.
Yes, sir. And I would be remiss if I did not also know that State Representative Flowers is a member of our AME denomination as well. Yes. But Representative Fielding, let me ask you this. How are you finding the dialogue so far, either in the legislature or with some of your white brothers and sisters in the state of Arkansas, recognizing that Arkansas is a state of the old Confederacy, just like Florida and all of the states that we inhabit? I recognize that sometimes it's very difficult, at least for me, to be able to converse with someone who is already closed-minded about the topic before we ever sit down and begin to converse. So, what are you sensing so far when you bring up these issues, whether it's George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor or what happened to State Representative Flowers? Like, are you finding that they are receptive to your perspective, or are you finding that many of your colleagues and their friends are just completely closed-minded to it?
No, you know, State Senator Elliott, I think maybe in the last session before last, she brought up, I think, some legislation where we could start having a dialogue about it, and those on the other side of the aisle, and we did have some, but didn't think it was the right time to deal with it, and then the answer to the question is when is the right time? The time is now. So, you know, we haven't really pushed that issue of trying to get that dialogue. It was brought up, and we commend Senator Elliott for bringing that up, but we didn't get it across the line. I don't think we might even didn't hardly get to the starting block until it was pushed back. So it's hard trying to get that conversation going, and I don't know, you know, which way we have to go, and that's some dialogue we'll have to do as a caucus as to how can we cross that line and to bring those persons to the table so we can start talking about racism in our country, well as in our state of Arkansas that we need to talk about. So it's been a subject that we have not been able to connect with yet, but still working on it.
Yes, sir. I thank you for that response. Representative Billy Mitchell, let me ask you this. Voter suppression remains an issue across the South. We all see it in our individual states. And of recent vintage is we all can see on the news where President Trump is already trying to delegitimize the potential outcome of the November election by calling into question absentee ballots or mail-in ballots. Ballots that usually are done by elderly individuals to great success, generally speaking. With that in mind, what are your concerns with regards to votes being undercounted or not counted at all on November 3rd, based upon some of the climate that we're seeing right now with regards to the entire process being discredited or questioned?
Georgia is probably ground zero for voter suppression. In our recently held primary election, we had some voters standing in line, now get this, up to 8 hours in the rain to cast their ballot. In some urban communities, voters had few voting machines, or I should say few working voter machines. And in suburban communities, they had more machines than they could use. They had difficulty staffing locations in the urban community. We had machines were breaking down. We assigned, we had so many issues going on that as a result, we formed a task force in this state to deal with all the issues. This task force came up with measures such as overwhelmingly increasing the number of voting machines that will be on hand, making sure that there's a technician at each and every polling location. We're going to pay poll workers almost twice the amount that they usually receive. And I will say, once again, the AME Church came to the forefront. Bishop Jackson offered 600 AME churches in the state of Georgia as polling locations, and the Secretary of State did make use of quite a few numbers of those churches. Now, with all that said, let me just point this out to you. Stacey Abrams, who should have been governor of Georgia, she really was cheated. She lost by 53,000 votes, which was 1.4% of the vote. However, we had 250,000 Black men who were registered in Georgia who did not vote. She only lost by 53,000 votes, but we had 250,000 Black men in the state of Georgia who did not vote. I understand there's similar circumstances in many swing states across the state. So in addition to taking advantage of early voting and absentee voting, I sponsored the original early voting bill in Georgia. Our battle cry is vote in numbers too big to suppress.
Understood. Representative Mitchell, let me follow up with that. What can we do to engage our brothers when you send a number out like that? 250,000 brothers that had they just taken the 30 minutes to go and blacken the oval for Stacey Abrams, there's a different outcome. How do we make this something that's important to individuals who clearly are not seeing the importance of each and every election?
Brother Hobbs, you're getting into a part of my remarks that you were going. I was going to reveal as to what my goals would be about NBCSL. Would love to talk about this. We certainly, women in the last election voted at over 70% of those who were registered. 70 was like 72, 73% of Black women were the number one demographic in the state of Georgia. They vote at such a great a percentage. Black men were less than 50%. I mentioned to a big time pastor here, as a matter of fact, many of you know him on this call, Reverend Jamal Bryant. I mentioned to him about my efforts to and put organizations together to find out the why so that we can address this. And it was interesting. He had a very interesting comment. He says, you know, the church needs this as well, because the overwhelming numbers of those who come to church are women. We need to form an alliance. I've already got a commitment from the NAACP, the Urban League, Jesse Jackson's group, Reverend Sharpton's group, and I'd love for the AME Church to get in this group so that we can find out the true reason why Black men are not as engaged in the process as they ought, and then come up with policies and strategies to address that.
Representative Mitchell, you mentioned the NBCSL, and I was going to ask you that individual question. Do you mind telling our viewers what that is and what your new position is within that organization?
Oh, I'd be happy to. You know,
sure.
the National Black Caucus of State Legislators is the organization that represents the interests of the African-American legislators all over this nation and U.S. possessions. 40% of the present Congressional Black Caucus are former members of NBCSL, including one who was on the short list for Vice President, Karen Bass, very active member who used to be the Speaker of the California Assembly. I will tell you, we've got some outstanding folk that are in this organization, as the folk that are on this call. But that also includes Representative Harold Love, who's the financial secretary of the organization, as well as Senator Audrey Gibson, who is chair of on our executive board in one of the regional leadership positions. We certainly, it is said that the only people who can create public policy are elected officials. That's the way those who created our style of government meant it to be. We have others who can influence it, others who can interpret it, others whose job it is to execute it. But the only people who can create public policy are elected officials. And we African-American legislators have a real interest in making certain that policy that is created would benefit, be fair and equitable to the citizens that we serve.
Thank you, sir, for that and for your service in that position. I want to go back to Senator Gibson right quick. And then from the question I'm going to ask Senator Gibson, actually, I'm going to open up to the floor to the other members of the panel also, because I'm interested in ascertaining what's going on in your states on this too. Senator Gibson, as you well know, billionaire Mike Bloomberg has pledged funds to help the Biden-Harris campaign in Florida. Specifically, he has also pledged funds to pay off fees for former felons who are seeking to vote. And I found it interesting about a week or so ago that current Attorney General here in Florida, Ashley Moody, launched an investigation, quote unquote, as to whether or not there's some form of tomfoolery, even in regards to that. And then number two, also that it became a Republican talking point and on right-wing media about the fact that, again, not only was Amendment 4 passed here in Florida, but when it met constitutional muster by a U.S. district judge and was ultimately kicked back to the states in regards to whether or not it is constitutional or not, specifically with the piece of whether or not your funds are paid before you have a right to vote. My question is, they keep moving the goalposts, so to speak, as we say, with regards to trying to disenfranchise Black voters. So with that in mind, what are you sensing as a member of the legislature here in Florida that can be done to address that issue? The fact that Republicans here in Florida continuously are trying different ways, whether it's the felon voting piece, whether it's trying to limit the number of days for early voting. What's being done here in Florida on voter suppression?
And thank you for that. Thank you for that question. And I want to know if racism is hate. And if racism is hate, our church should be able to denounce it every time. And we should have training on we can go back to the 60s, what racism looks like and how we respond to it. And is this whole situation with the Republican Party and your governor, Mr. Hobbs, continually going against the amendment that over 60% of the people in the state passed, wanting ex-felons to be able to vote? And since the majority of those individuals in contact with our correction system are African Americans. Is what they're doing racism? Is what they're doing racism? And if it is, and racism is hate, we need to call them out on it and push back through our own website, our church. And so the idea that they're upset, here's why they're upset, everyone. They're upset because Mike Bloomberg found a way around them trying to keep our felons from voting based on the silliness of they think the constitutional amendment said, well, you have to pay fine, fees, and restitution, which is not true. And so Mike Bloomberg has said, hey, look, he didn't, as far as I know, he didn't say that he would only pay the fines and fees for African Americans. I've seen that the answer to the question is he is paying fines, fees for ex-felons. And he's gone around the way because that's all the governor and the attorney general and all those folks on the wrong side of this issue wanted anyway, was to put the block by using fine, fees, and restitution to have to qualify to be able to vote. So that's being taken care of. The fines and fees are being taken care of. So there's no issue and no reason why the individuals under your little rules shouldn't now be able to register and vote.
Senator Gibson, I found that.
That's it. I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am. I found that problematic as well. I think that far too often in this country, people assume crime and or the word felon, and they assume black because far too often that's what the national media will purvey. And, you know, having been a prosecutor and having been a defense attorney for a long time, I can tell you that if you go into any county, any of the 67 counties here in Florida on any given day, there are in many instances just as many white men and women who are being charged with crimes as there are black. And I've always found that frustrating, though, that when the issue of crime is raised, they always like to slap a black picture onto whatever the criminal issue might be. So you're absolutely right. The money that that Mr. Bloomberg was going to earmark would be available to any felon, regardless of race. But somehow last week, your governor, not mine, Ron DeSantis and others, they seized upon that as if this was some type of way to, I think I even read somewhere where one of those people, either was DeSantis or Attorney General Moody, even made the comment that it's racist what Bloomberg is doing. And I'm like, how is that? You're acting as if this is only benefiting black people when there are a whole lot of whites and Latinos who are former felons here in Florida and disenfranchised as well. To the rest of the group, anybody else want to take a crack at this? I know Senator Witherspoon, you've been quiet for a little while now. What are your thoughts with regards to former felons and or voter suppression issues in the state of Mississippi right now?
First of all, you know, Mississippi is the among the minority of the states that do not have an excuse for early voting. So what we're doing here and what we see here in Mississippi, as far as felonies, there was a bill, Senate Bill 2123, that was introduced this session, and it addressed those issues with voting franchise and trying to reinstate some felonies to vote. But the bill did pass. The bill passed both houses. At the last minute, the governor vetoed the bill. So we've been meeting with a lot of different organizations and continuing the dialogue on this. So we're hoping to bring up the bill for the session of 2021 to try to bring the bill back out and bring the bill back up. Some of the local sheriff associations, of course, and some judges fought against it. You know why? We don't know. Well, we really know. We know. But so we're just going to continue to fight and continue to try to push good legislation forward that will allow felonies to vote.
Yes, ma'am. And while I have you, Senator Witherspoon, one of the questions I wanted to ask you which is somewhat similar in that we're talking about racism in general across the South in these red states. Earlier this year, something happened that I did not think would happen in my lifetime, which is the Confederate flag emblem that's emblazoned within the state flag of Mississippi all of a sudden is going to be changed. That's something that I never thought I would see. And yet here we are. And part of that was because of the social justice movement that we have been talking about, and specifically some of the comments from athletes at Division I universities in your state, where they were indicating that they would not play if the state of Mississippi's flag did not change. Can you talk to our viewers about that process and what that was like to see that historic moment happen earlier this year?
Oh my God, yes, I would. I've actually been waiting for that question. There was a very historic moment for our state of Mississippi. And as you said earlier, we know some of our best players are African Americans. And what happened was the players wasn't going to play, and then the SEC, the Southeastern Conference of Football, they said that, listen, we're not coming to the state of Mississippi until that flag is gone. And what happened, you had coaches from the SEC, SWAC coaches, universities, junior college coaches, all of them got together and they actually came to the Capitol. They came in large numbers. They came to the Capitol. They met with the leadership, and they informed the leadership, look, this is hurting us. This is hurting our schools. This is hurting our players. And of course, two of our biggest schools in Mississippi are part of the SEC, which is Mississippi State University and the University of Mississippi, known as Ole Miss. So they were a big part of our SEC. And then you had the business owners, they didn't want to locate. They sent the letter, said they will not relocate to Mississippi until that flag is moved. So what you got? You got a movement going. We had people to step up, and they met with the leadership. And the lieutenant governor called legislators in, different senators in at different time, and asked us how we felt about it, and say it's the time. It's time to remove the flag. And the rest is history. It was a very memorable moment. I was so happy to be a part of history, and to remove that flag. And on this November ballot, along with the presidential election, we will be voting on a new flag. We will be voting on flag. And the governor, he put a task force together to come up with a different flag. And what's going to happen, of course, that symbol will go off the flag. It would not be used on any of the flags. So they actually had 6 flags that was presented. And then they narrowed it down to 3, and then it was narrowed down to 1. So this particular flag will be on the November ballot, and we can either vote it up or vote it down. It is a picture of a magnolia flag. I wish I had a picture of it to show you, but you all can go on the website and see it. But if it's voted down, the task force will go back and come up with another flag. And that flag will be presented for an election as well. But we're so excited. The flag seems to be a good flag. I've heard no opposition, except for the ones that wanted to keep the flag. But we think that we're big in numbers, and that this flag is a flag for all of Mississippi, and that we will see, and that you all will see real soon, the new Mississippi state flag.
Yes, ma'am. And congratulations on that. And I was watching this past weekend. I went to law school at the University of Florida. I was watching the University of Florida play Ole Miss in football this past Saturday. And that's it. And I was looking to see whether there would be hard-hearted folks that would still bring the Confederate stars and bars into that stadium. And I noticed that I saw none. So congratulations to you all for being able to put one of the relics of racism past to rest. With that, Representative Logan, I'm sorry, someone.
Yes, Representative Felden.
Go ahead, brother.
Let me go back to Senator Gibson was when we were talking about voter registration for those that persons committed felonies. We don't, not as a caucus that we have, set up any kind of collaborative meeting and trying to express those persons who are victims of a felony that, I hear this because I'm out on the campaign trail now too. And what we are doing, we are telling them, that if they not on parole, they're not on probation, and owe no fines, then yes, go and get your registration renewed. But a lot of them still feel that they can't go because I committed a felony, and we are trying to correct that as we see it, to get that on a change of mind where you can go vote, and a lot of them have been out for years, have served, did their time, and have no fines, and still been used that old mentality that we've been bred in, that hey, you can't vote because I committed a felony. So that's something we're gonna have to keep preaching as we go on.
Yes, sir, Representative Fielden, and I thank you for that comment. And Representative Love, let me bring you back in. This past summer, I was reading last week that one of your fellow legislators, Mike Carter, joked about Representative Joe Towns being busy getting the secret formula to Kentucky Fried Chicken. Representative Towns being black, like how we are. Now, this Representative Carter later apologized. My question to you is this: 20 years into the 21st century, and we are still dealing with demeaning stereotypes and overt racial hostility from some white lawmakers in the South. How do black legislators even put up with it? I mean, when I say how do you put up with it, it has to be frustrating. What are some ways that you go about when you're dealing with those overt hostilities to help make sure that the key issues that are important to your constituents get addressed?
Thank you for that question. And I think some of this piggybacks upon the issue with Mississippi and the state flag. Many people may not know, but we have in our state capitol the bust of one of the first grand wizards of the Ku Klux Klan, Nathan Bedford Forrest. And we've been trying for years to get that bust removed. Several years ago, one of our colleagues passed legislation that would make it harder to get that bust removed. And even though we went through the process of following those specific directives, having the State Capitol Commission to vote to remove it, then having the Historical Commission prepared to grant the waiver to remove it, we've recently had two of our leaders in the Senate and the House say that there's another commission that now must approve that before it can go to the Historical Commission. And I lay that out because it was in the backdrop of all that conversation and dialogue about the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue in the state capitol that we had this racial tension rather in our General Assembly. And this is one of the things we were talking to our speaker about, the fact that these offhand comments are unnecessary, number one, the disrespectful, number two, and the outright unneeded, number three. And so the difficulty we have oftentimes is that the people who are making these comments are often chairs of committees, and you're having to navigate through the process of bringing your legislation, trying to get the number of votes that you need to get the bill passed, all while trying to remind your colleagues that their comments about Kentucky Fried Chicken and other foods, watermelon, all this kind of stuff is outdated, unnecessary, and disrespectful. So I'm grateful to the fact that Representative Carter did apologize, but I still have concerns because that comment came from someplace in his heart and in his soul. It wasn't just something that he just said because it was thought to be funny. And many of us remind him of that, the fact that these are the vestiges of slavery we're talking about. These are those dehumanizing comments that our ancestors had to deal with. But more than that, it's part of devaluing Black people. And it's unnecessary. And we hope to move forward from that. But again, as we've seen here recently, even our efforts to remove the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust has now been given the proverbial moving of the goal line. So now there's a second step required. So it's very disconcerting. We do our best to get legislation passed in the midst of having such a highly charged racial environment. But even when we pass some bills, we do it in the backdrop of knowing that some of our colleagues do think that way about us.
Thank you, Representative Love. Now, this is an individual question, but actually I'm going to pose it to the group. There are historically Black colleges and universities in each of the states that you represent. From a public standpoint, we have Florida A&M University here in Florida, we've got Fort Valley, Albany State and Savannah State universities in Georgia. You've got Tennessee State University in Tennessee. You've got Jackson, Alcorn, and Mississippi Valley over in Mississippi. And you have Arkansas Pine Bluff in Arkansas. Cognizant that these legislators are crucial with regards to earmarking funds for those historically Black universities. How has that process been over the course of the last 3 or 4 years? And I'll start with, let's see, Representative Mitchell. Let me start with you in Georgia. The funding for the 3 public HBCUs there in Georgia, and then I will hit each one of the other panelists.
Well, I will tell you, thank God for the Black legislators that are members of the General Assembly in Georgia, because I don't think it surprises anyone on this panel that very oftentimes they the HBCUs are underfunded. We have to fight so drastically for the funding that they do receive. The reality is we are outnumbered, so we have to make the gains sometimes slowly and where we can. But there is one issue related to that, and I will tell you, we're on Republican leadership now. I may be the speaker next year. We shall see. I think we're going to make enough gains. But the reality is, even under Democratic leadership, when I first came into the House, making certain that economic opportunities for Black schools and Black businesses was a tall order. But I tell you, we had a new phenomenon this particular legislative session. We passed medicinal marijuana. Now, that could not have passed in Georgia without Democratic, specifically Black Democrats' support of it. So being that was the case, we were able to negotiate all kinds of economic opportunities, specifically for Black schools, for Fort Valley State. We went to, they originally had in the bill that they were going to allow the state's flagship university, University of Georgia, to be the research institution, therefore making them eligible to receive hundreds, as I said, hundreds of millions of dollars. We said, we're not going to stand for that. You're going to put Fort Valley State on that as well, because they have an agriculture department. And today, as we stand, they're in line to receive the benefits of hundreds of millions of dollars, but for the Black members of the Georgia General Assembly. And that's going to be one of the planks in my administration as the incoming president of NBCSL, want to be able to create economic opportunities for Black businesses, Black folks in their careers, and certainly HBCUs as well.
Thank you, Representative Mitchell. Representative Love, back over to you. Tennessee State University, how are things going with funding there for that public HBCU?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Tennessee State is unique in that it's one of the 1890 land grant universities, and like many of our land grant universities all across the country, they were created because the other land grants in our state would not allow African Americans to enroll. And so our land grants are celebrating 130 years of existence at this time. One thing I discovered when I first got elected was that Tennessee State was still being underfunded with their land grant match. Just very quickly, I want to say this. Every land grant is supposed to get a 1-to-1 match for federal dollars. They're supposed to get $1 from the federal government, and then that other dollar that comes in is supposed to be from the state. So for every federal dollar that they get, they're supposed to get a match from the state. Tennessee State had not gotten its full match since I got elected in 2012. Other legislators had worked on it. My father worked on it when he was in the legislature from 1968 to 1994. Representative Brenda Gilmore worked on it when she was in the legislature from 2006 to 2014, or to 2018. And so when I came in 2012, I saw the disparity and discovered, based on my research, that starting in 1955, Tennessee State did not get its full 1-to-1 match. The percent was supposed to be 75% goes to the University of Tennessee at Knoxville and 25% went to Tennessee State. But what was happening was 99% was going to UT Knoxville and 1% going to Tennessee State. And so that puts universities woefully behind, because when you're not getting your 1-to-1 match, you then have to prove to the federal government that you did get the match. And so what Tennessee State often had to do was take from their general fund to make the match. So now what you have is decades of delayed maintenance on buildings, decades of teachers not getting their salary increases, decades of financial aid being woefully behind because Tennessee State was not being given its required match from the state of Tennessee. My research yielded that Tennessee State was owed between $30 million and $35 million just from 1996 to 2016. My other research is showing that between 1955 and 1996, Tennessee State, just not even calculating interest, is owed at this point about $100 million easily. So I have a meeting with the governor and the Speaker of the House and the Senate to discuss a task force that's supposed to be formed in the fall to get at the bottom line number of what Tennessee State is owed. And this is one of the situations where again, we talk about our public HBCUs that are 1890 land grant universities. They suffer woefully behind because that match that they're supposed to get is oftentimes given to their sister institution, which is a white university. And then we find, again, there's delayed maintenance on buildings, again, low financial aid supports for students. And of course, the inability of the president to oftentimes provide substantial salary increases to faculty members. So I'm pleased to know that going forward, we're going to do this. And just as a record, we did get some arrearage last year. We had $1.9 million in recurring funds set aside for arrearage for Tennessee State. So we made some progress, but right now I'm working on that amount from 1955 to 1996.
That is outstanding, and I look forward to talking to you about that in the future as that continues to go on, the work that you're doing there in Tennessee. Senator Gibson, Florida A&M University is the only public HBCU here in Florida, but I also know that there have been times within which certain funds have been also earmarked for some of the private institutions, specifically Edward Waters, an AME institution. There also has been a push where there have been some funds given to Bethune-Cookman with some of the issues that they are facing down there in Daytona. Can you speak on the funding piece specifically with the one public Black institution here in Florida, FAMU, and then also speak on Edward Waters or any other efforts to help fund either the Bethune-Cookman or Florida Memorial down in Miami?
Thank you. So I'll start with the private universities, Bethune-Cookman, Florida Memorial, and Edward Waters College. This year, we were able to get $30 million in the pot for recurring, which is it's the first time in ever that this has happened. Of course, if the money was divided up, BCU was having a big struggle, and so we were able to direct the $16 million to them for recurring, and the remainder for the other three institutions. And obviously, their enrollment is different, and that plays a factor into how the funds were divvied up as well. So on the FAMU side, even though it's an HBCU, as you mentioned, it's still considered a state university. And so this year they did get $22.6 million in education enhancement funds. Last year, I guess, as opposed to that, they got the student success building was budgeted. It just, even we could talk about it till we're blue in the face. There's still some funding divisions that I believe that can be better addressed because it is a state university. Obviously, the student population is a bit lower than, let's say, for a state university, or I think you said your alma mater was that other school in Gainesville.
Well, that was just law school. Now I went to undergrad at Morehouse College in Atlanta. I'm a Morehouse man, and then I went to graduate school at FAMU. So I'm a two-time HBCU grad first and foremost. All right.
A little bit of a dig, right?
All right. Got to make sure the record is correct. Okay.
Very serious. While you have to find some humor sometimes in this earth.
Amen.
And so we can do better. And let me tell you a place where I think we can do better, because the bar starts to moving as well, as you well know, Mr. Hobbs. We have our universities of excellence, our distinction, and what all the things that you have to do to be that. And even while you're getting more funding to be able to do it, right? So FAMU isn't necessarily in that particular category overall, but we know it is a university of excellence. And the other part of it has to do with our the Bright Future scholarships, right? So and for those who don't know, these are fully paid for college that students get, but you have to have a certain grade point level. And I agree with reaching for the highest grade point level, but every other year the level starts to move and leaves more and more of our African American students out. And so, which could be more money going into FAMU, if you will, for tuition. The other side of that, though, is we've requested, and I've specifically requested, that we look at how we can make sure, because Bright Futures covers at least one semester of summer school. How can we get our kids to have summer school written in as covered as part of our grant plan? Right? Why can't we increase the financial aid to include that one semester of summer school for our FAMU students who financially struggle at home? And so they sometimes have to stay out of the semester to make sure all the money works. We could do better by FAMU in that particular instance. And the other way we could do better is because the Bright Futures kids get a book stipend too. Well, we can add financial aid book stipend into the pot for those kids, largely minority students who attend FAMU. So there are things we can do. And so I will keep my my foot on the pedal on those issues. And I know our Black Caucus will too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Senator Witherspoon, we have Alcorn, we have Mississippi Valley and Jackson State Universities over in Mississippi. Can you talk to our viewers a little bit about, do we still have Senator Witherspoon with us? I think she may be gone. Okay. So I'm going to end with Representative Fielding. Can you talk about the allocation process from the legislature for Arkansas Pine Bluff and whether there are any other funds being earmarked to private HBCUs in Arkansas?
Some state funding for UAPB as well as Shorter and other Black schools that was in the state. So you know, it was a collaborative effort with the Black Caucus. Really send down with the governor, letting him know, you know, that these schools need this money, and we was able to work those fundings out for all our Black schools here in the state of Arkansas.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that is good news to hear. And this brings us to the end of our dialogue this afternoon. And I actually want No. I know, right? I know. Parting in such sweet sorrow, but I guarantee you that I will work on my editor, John Thomas, to see if we can convene again. It's such an exciting season right now, obviously.
I don't know. It took me 4 years. I don't know now, John.
John's going to get on you in the broadcast studio once we finish. That's going to be an interesting discussion. But seriously, from the bottom of my heart, I thank each of you for taking your time out today to enlighten our listeners and our viewers on many of these important issues. And I wish you Godspeed as you continue to do your important work. And I also look forward again to being able to talk to each of you either individually or collectively in the days ahead about other issues of importance to Black people in general and to our denomination specifically. And with that, as we get ready to head out, I want to make sure that I announce to our viewers that
Chuck, before you wrote,
yes, ma'am.
If you don't mind. Okay. I want to join you in thanking our guests for being present. This is our inaugural state legislators dialogue, and you are the first 5 of the 30 who have self-identified as AMEs. So we look to you to help us in bringing the others aboard. And who knows, someone in the audience may be in that body by then, because we encourage you to find a way to serve and to serve as an elected official. We did notice in the group, and I could only see Facebook, so I apologize, Bishops McKenzie, McLeod, and Bishop Guidry. Thank you for being with us. I saw former Senator Peter Groff in the group. our former publisher's spouse, Ms. Bobby Henderson, our Judicial Council member, Star Battle, connectional leaders and members of the General Board of the Social Action Commission, clergy and laity, thank you for being with us. We want to remind us that the Census 2020 has new life. It will now go to October 31st. And on that day, if you celebrate Halloween, wear your justice costume. But remember, we are now able to complete our census until October 31st. We want to invite you to go to www.ame-v-alert, V for voter-alert.org, so that you may get ready for this election season on this 36 days that we have left. You will find videos of 5 of our bishops, Bishops Richardson, Mitchell, Byfield, White, and Few. You will find the videos of 2 of George Floyd's friends, Mr. Veal and Mr. Mouton, who are now convinced that they must vote and get others to vote. Our own very Dr. Jamie Coleman Williams is there. Deborah Winans of Greenleaf has a video for you to see, as well as our own Cheryl Eiffel and me. You will find the toolkit where you can make yourself actively engaged on a daily basis, but don't forget to download the daily countdown. The daily countdown has something every day that each one of us can do to mobilize the vote. There are links to Facebook and Instagram posts. Our social media is being managed by our millennials. This is our time. This is our watch. Spend some time every day doing something to get us to do what?
Amen.
Vote.
Sister DuPont Walker,
Thank
you
you
so much for those words. And with that, again, I want to thank everybody who took time out of their schedules today to pay attention to this very important forum. I want to also let you know that the next TCR dialogue will be on October 5th, and it will feature Antoine Seawright and the chair of the Democratic National Committee, Mr. Tom Perez. I also would like to note that you can support the Christian Recorder by buying a subscription for $36 a year. Visit www.thechristianrecorder.com. You also can support the AME Church Publishing House for your church, school, and worship needs. Featured product is the Empowerment Syllabus. Visit www.amecpublishing.com. I also would like to thank our sponsors, Reverend Dr. James F. Miller, who is a 2021 candidate for Executive Director of Retirement Services.
Hi, everybody. God bless you today. Many years ago, the Retirement Services Department was known as minimum salary, and it was combined with the Stewardship Department. I went to a conference sponsored by them many years ago now, 30 years ago. I hate to date myself. But I received at that conference all the instruction, the materials, and encouragement I needed to go home, not only and become a tither, praise God, but to lead my church, DuPage AME Church in the Chicago Conference, to become a tithing church. I'm so thankful. After these many years, over £1 million of food given to the poor, over $500,000 in scholarships to graduating high school seniors. Praise God, all of the many blessings. And so God called me to revive the stewardship component of the Retirement Services Department, in addition to overseeing the pension. I pray, hallelujah, that you'll be with us on a discussion, a book discussion that we're having on Monday, October 12th at 7 p.m. Because the AME Church planted a seed. The ministry over these years has watered the seed, and God has given the increase. Join the discussion, and let's bless the kingdom. It's a path to abundance for the local church.
Again, thank you so much. I want to thank each of the panelists again. Sister DuPont Walker, I want to thank you too for all that you do for our denomination. And I want to thank each of you who paid attention this afternoon. And we look forward to seeing you at the next TCR Dialogues. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
And Chuck, I forgot to mention our senior bishop, Bishop Richardson. who is also amongst us. You greeted him.
Amen.
I want the others to know.
Thank you for the invitation.
Stop.
Thank you.
I need your undivided attention. I am Jamie Coleman Williams. I am proud to have been born into the African Methodist Episcopal Church, a church born out of protest. Our church has always led the way in striving to make our country live up to its stated ideals. Right now, an attempt is being made to suppress the vote. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that we AMEs again band together, this time to assure every eligible voter goes to the polls and votes on or before November 3rd. I'm urging you to partner with AME Alert to make sure all eligible voters cast their votes. Our votes count.
Have a good afternoon and a great week.